we had many lessons about state management and how important it is to keep your apps organized. This lesson is where it all comes together and we really show you why it's so important. For this, we're going to be creating a user state that keeps the user information throughout our whole application. I want to show you a little visual about why this is so important. This state is going to be in charge of a lot of what our application does. For example, we're going to be using this state to display information on our home page. So our home page will be using this data to display information. But why does it matter? Because this is the central hub for everything related to the user. So not only is the home going to be using this, when we're signing the user up, it's going to be going here. We're going to have a function called sign up in here. And that sign up function will be changing the email and maybe the name and returning it to the home page. So all the data is managed within this one big state. Now, not just sign up, of course, sign in will be using this, sign out will be using this, and later on we're going to have a function called update where we can maybe change our name, and that's going to be controlling from here as well. So everything is centered around this state, and we know it's always up to date, and everything within our app relies on this one place. So what that does is if something goes wrong, we know exactly where to find where it went wrong. If it was something user related that went wrong, we go to the user state to fix it. So let's go ahead and implement the state to our app. First thing, let's actually create that state. I'm going to put it in a folder called providers. Inside that folder, we're going to have a user provider.dart. Now for this, we're going to be using a state notifier provider because not only do we want to give the state to wherever it is needed, but we want to also add functions to that state like sign in, sign up, and all that. And actually, to do that, we first need to import the package because we didn't do that yet. Flutter RiverPod. Okay, and now we can have a state notifier provider here. We're going to call it the user provider. And then we need two things. So we need the state notifier, which we'll call user notifier. And we'll need the data type, which we're going to call local user. Now I named this local user because we're going to be using first our ID for the user. This is how we can tell each user apart. But then also we're going to be using that data class we created, Firebase user. So I want to make sure this isn't mixed up between what is our local state and what is our interface to Firebase. At the top, we can define the function to actually create this data object, and we're also going to create a copy with method. We create this copy with using that Dart data class generator, and what this copy with method allows us to do is to create another local user with all the information here except whatever we want to change. So if you remember with the counter, we had to set a completely new state. We had to do state and state plus one. So this state had to be completely new. So since our state is going to be local user, we want to use the old local user data and then copy with, in this case, maybe the new counter would go here, or maybe the updated name or anything like that. As we go through this example, hopefully this copy with method will make sense. So the state notifier will have a state of local user, and we need to give a default local user with the ID. We'll give it an error and a user with Firebase user with the email error. And these errors are because we didn't import RiverPod just yet. So our state provider first needs to give access to the user notifier and then to our actual state of local user. Okay, so that was all just the setup for the state notifier. We have our actual state object, and then we have our functions. We can start implementing all the features now. So our first one, I think, should be the sign up feature. So we don't want any returns, and this is a future. So we're going to call it sign up. Only thing we need is the email. And we can actually copy whatever we did in our normal sign in. Normal sign up, that is. And we can paste that in here. So we can remove this. Bring into our sign up. Change this email controller just to email because we get it passed in. Make it asynchronous. Bring in our Firebase Firestore, which we won't need now within our signup page, so it cleans up our signup a little bit. And bring it into our user notifier instead. Okay, so that's good, but we need to update our state now. In order to do that, we need the response for this addition. If we highlight this add function, you'll see it returns a document reference type. So that's the reference to what we just created here. And then we can just set our state to be the local user with an ID coming from the response. I need to make sure to spell it right. And then our user being a Firebase user with an email of email. Okay, so sign up should work. We can actually test it out. We can go to our home screen. And remember, to read the state, we can use a consumer, or we can change the stateless widget to a consumer widget. And that gives us our reference to the providers. And then within our body, maybe, yes, let's put it in the body, can have a column with some children. And we're going to do ref.watch user provider .user .email and wrap this in a text. Okay, so now if we sign up, we should see the user's email in the home coming from the state object, and we get a new user created here. Let's give it a shot. What email haven't I used? Let's just do 123@tatus.com. And then my safe password, FYI, is just 123456, every single one. And we sign up. And we do not see our refs. Oh, because I'm not even running the application. Okay, let's run the application first. And this was the old application that we had before all these changes. Now we're going to have 123 taken. Now we need to think of a new email. All right. How about I just do tatus@gmail.com? Yeah, that's good. It's okay. Let's try to sign up again. I have tatus@gmail.com. Password 123456. We sign up. No provider scope found. Okay. So we have a problem. Forgot one important thing when using RiverPod. In the main function, we need to wrap this app within the provider scope so that our whole app has access to those providers that we defined. So wrap it with a provider scope. Make sure it gets imported. And now we can rerun it. And we have an error because it didn't work that first time, so sign out. Let's try to sign up a third time. We do Tatus. We're going to start going into numbers. So tatus1@gmail.com. Password 123456. Sign up. This time it worked. And we're still seeing an error. Why is that? Okay, I see what the problem is here. This sign up function, we actually don't call it anywhere. I forgot another key part. In the sign up screen, we need to actually add that sign up call to our chain of events. So this needs to change to a consumer stateful widget so we can get access to that ref that gives us access to our providers, which means we need to have a consumer state. This is consumer state. For a consumer stateful widget, you don't need to define the ref, you just get access to it. So we get down here, we can do the ref.read user provider. And for this one, we need the notifier because we want access to that function. The function is sign up. We need to pass the email. Email is the email controller.text. Okay, we await that to finish. Now let's try again. Gonna run out of numbers. So tatus3@gmail.com. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sign up. And there we go. This time our state finally gets loaded in and we get all this new information here that we can use throughout our application now. Then rinse and repeat. We just got to do this for 2 more functions. First the sign out and then the login function. And all of it has to stem from this user provider. So for the logout function, we actually don't really need to do much because the authentication is getting handled within our application. So here, we just want to set the state to the error state, because we shouldn't be using our state or displaying it everywhere if we're not logged in, because there's no user if we're logged out. So if it's getting presented anywhere, it needs to tell us that there's an error. And this is already a consumer widget, but when we do sign out, let's do a ref.read user provider and then log out to make sure our state is getting reset. And it needs to be a .notifier because that's where the functions are. And last one is the login. This one's the more complicated one because when we sign up, we have the email already here. But when we log in, we don't have that information. It's on the database. So we need to go looking for it first and then set it to our state. The structure is similar to our sign up. So we're going to end up setting our state as the response ID, but we have to go and get that response first. So we want to log in with our email. Maybe we could even call this like retrieve user information instead of login, because we're not actually doing any logging in. Authentication is taking care of that. We're just getting that information. And the sign up could be changed to something like add a user to database, because we're not really signing them up. And if we're going along with that, I guess logout could be changed to clear user state. I'll leave it up to you how you want to name these. So here, we're not going to be actually adding anybody to our user collection. Instead, we're going to take our user collection and we're going to do a query on it. So we want the field email. We want to find the user where their email is equal to the email that we pass in. And we want to retrieve that user. So we get an error here because this is no longer a document reference. It is a query snapshot. And query snapshot actually returns a list of those users. So it returns a bunch of documents with all the users that fit this field. Now in theory, there should only be one user like that, and he will be in the first place within the array. But maybe we want to add some checks just in case. So if there's no documents returned, then we know no Firestore user is associated with the email. If there's more than one, then we know there's more than one user associated with the email, and that's going to bring up some problems. The only way this could ever happen is if our authentication goes out of line with our Firestore. In theory, that should never happen, but it never hurts to just double check. Okay, that login works. Let's actually implement it here. And again, I think this is a stateful widget. We can turn it into a consumer stateful widget. change this to consumer state. Make sure we import Flutter RiverPod. And then we can go down here and do a ref.read user provider .notifier and log in with this specific email. Okay, so our application should have the state set up. I know in the beginning stages, this might seem like a lot of work, but it sets you up for success for the rest of your app build because it makes things really easy. You know exactly where to find all your user information. All the sign-in, homepage, everything is based off of this user provider. So now within our application, we could go test everything out. We can log in now. Let's say tadas3@gmail.com. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Log in. Perfect. And next lesson, we're going to add some more data where it's going to become more useful for us. Like we're going to add the name and the profile picture.